How's it going, everybody, and welcome to episode 232 of Master My Garden Podcast. Now, this week's episode is the seed sowing guide for July. And I suppose, typically these months we have an eye, particularly on the vegetable garden, and we talk about other gardening jobs as well. Now, this episode or this type of episode has proven really popular because I suppose people need to have something to keep a reminder, I guess, on a monthly basis as to what can I sow this month or what should I be sowing this month. So yeah, these episodes prove really popular. It's still continuing to be a funny year as I record this. It's a windy day, quite cold. It's feels a lot colder than it is. Like it says it's 16 degrees, but because of the wind and the lack of sunshine, it feels quite cold. And I suppose because of that, there's a lot of seeds that I would have, said last month, this is the last chance to sow them. But because of this, I suppose, coolness that there is, I'm going to leave some of them on this month. So typically they would have come off in the month of June. But I'm leaving them on this month because I think there might be a bit of an opportunity to, given the weather conditions, to capture some of these one last time. These type sowings, they tend to be a little bit experimental, so you may or you may not have success with them, but there's no real harm anyway. July is a month where you're going to be doing a good bit of harvesting. A lot of your crops, certainly your second early potatoes are going to be ready. Onions and garlic are potentially going to be ready this month, depending on when you got them into the ground. And so there's going to be space, to get some of these crops in, and those crops are going to give you harvest later in the year and even into early next year. So yeah, lots to be doing. July, as I say, it also kind of coincides with when people go on holidays, and it's a month where the garden can get slightly neglected a little bit, and that's no harm, if everyone needs our holidays. And I guess what you're doing at this stage is you're, I suppose, managing and tending to what you have. Potentially, if you're getting someone to come in and water, you're doing that in exchange for some harvest, I guess. And that's always a good deal if you can barter that with somebody. So yeah, lots to be at this month. Seed sowing list is definitely smaller, but there's some still on. So we're going to shoot through them, and then we'll talk about kind of some other jobs you can be doing. So as usual, a few of the successional crops are still on it. So we have spring onions, again, continuing to sow those regularly. They're one that we can sow for the next couple of months, and definitely one that most people eat and enjoy. I'm going to go through a couple here now that I've kept on that I would normally take off the list for July. And the first one is savoy cabbage or winter varieties of cabbage. As I say, normally they'd be gone off the list, but given that it has been a little bit cold, I think there might be still an opportunity to sow these in module trays and get one last planting outside in a couple of weeks' time. So cabbage, purple sprouting broccoli, green sprouting broccoli, again, worth trying, and calabrese. Now, I will sow calabrese anyway for planting out into the polytunnel, for later in the month, or certainly into early August, and they'll give you a harvest, September, October time. And that's something that's worth doing. But if you don't have a greenhouse or a polytunnel, it's worth trying one more sowing there of those. Beetroot, a winter variety, again, and all of these, I stress, is very early in the month. So certainly in the first 4 or 5 days of July. It is really the last chance, and this is a bit of an experiment, but I think just given the year that we've had, it's worth having a shot at it. Beetroot, a winter variety, is another one that you can do. Chard, again, normally too late for this, but worth a try. Carrots is another one that's worth a try. And again, I am speaking about the very, very early days of July, giving that a go. And, you may or you may not have success with it, but at least you're having a shot. And at worst case scenario with some of them, the likes of beetroot, for example, if you don't ever get a proper, head forming, you're definitely going to get some leaves off it. Now, I sowed beetroot in probably late July or August last year in the polytunnel, and they formed lovely little baby beetroot for kind of later in the year, and was harvesting them right up until probably May of this year. So, there is opportunities to do these things, and they may not always be exactly what you'd read off the back of a packet or get a recommendation from a book on. So again, sometimes worth trying these things. Sometimes they don't work out, but always worth having a go. So those ones, as I say, should be off the list, but we've left them on a little longer just at the off chance that we can catch a couple of them. Kale is one that we can sow this month. Again, this is the last chance for kale. And yeah, that's a good one. Again, some can go into the greenhouse later in the year as well. And you get a bit of a harvest off that. Spinach is another one. At this time of the year, you tend to see it run into seed very, very quickly. So sowed regularly, harvested regularly as well, and try and get it before it goes to seed. But it will go to seed quite quickly. But just continue to sow it. This is the annual spinach, and you'll continue to harvest nice crops off that for the coming months. Radish, again, continue to sow. Possibly later in the month we'll start to switch to a winter variety, and we can continue to sow these for the next couple of months. As the list gets smaller, the likes of these will still remain on it. Lettuce, again, same thing. You can still sow successionally on those, and again you can start to switch to more autumn stroke winter varieties later on, or there's a couple of them all year round. There's one that grows all year round, and that's a good one. And then there's some other good ones, Arctic King, I think name mightn't be right, but there's autumn varieties and winter varieties of lettuce, and you can start to switch to them from now on. Autumn salad leaves, the usual mix of lettuce, rocket, mustard, those ones. Then you can continue to sow some of the herbs that were kind of sown successionally, the coriander, dill, chervil, those ones. Parsley, again, you can still grow that. And pak choi is another one. Now, I haven't had a huge amount of success with pak choi. Even in my polytunnel, for some reason, it tends to go to seed. So I don't know whether it's because I'm sowing it too early, the temperatures, I'm not sure exactly what it is, but continue to try it, get some harvest off it, but not a really good harvest. And and then along with the ones that would normally have come off the list, that's kind of your sowing list in terms of the vegetable garden. And some flowers you can still be sowing. And again, given the year that we've had, I think there's still an opportunity for some of the annuals, albeit that it's quite late. But maybe if they get growing really well now, that you get some flower towards August, end of August, September, October, and even maybe into early November. So it's just been a strange kind of a growing season. Then, as I say, it's the huge part of it this year is, all about, at this time of the year, is all about protecting and tending to what we have. So with that in mind, like temperatures can get quite high, plant growth can be very soft at this time of the year, and aphids can, become a problem at this stage of the year. So just keep on top of that, keep an eye out for that. You can jet them off with your water. You can use, on your vegetable plot, you can use organic solutions and so on. But definitely a good way to do it, as we spoke about before, is to incorporate, more flour that will bring in beneficials, and those beneficials will take out your green fly. And that's certainly worth doing, but keep an eye out for them, because they do become, or can become, prevalent, during these warm months. Then other thing is slugs, obviously, again, has continued to be, a challenge this year. The wet weather early in the time and, relatively warm weather has, I suppose, made that problem a little bit worse. And then you're looking at root fly still, cabbage and carrot, keep an eye out for those. And our friend at this time of the year, or the one we watch out for a lot, is the white butterfly, and the caterpillar. The eggs that are laid and the caterpillar that develops from that can decimate your brassicas particularly, and you can be left with stalks. So just, if you're not netting them with bio netting or enviromesh or some of those, then what you need to be doing is checking regularly and watching out for those eggs, watching out for those caterpillars, and picking them off and ensuring that your crops don't get badly damaged, because they can at this stage of the year. So regular check on that. Then in terms of your potatoes, keep an eye out for blight. Quite high pressure of blight currently at the moment, so just keep an eye on those. And there's a couple of spray options out there at the moment, and they're to keep your crops looking good. They're worth having. And keep an eye, if you get badly infected, just get the leaves off as quick as you can, get the stalks off as quick as you can, before it gets down into the tubers, and you might have a chance of saving some of your crop. And yeah, keep an eye out for that. I'm certainly myself keeping an eye out for slugs this year on potatoes. They seem to be growing really well again. I'm watching, and I don't think I have any issues at the moment, but I'm definitely keeping an eye on it, because the damage that they did last year was just so frustrating. And yeah, that's kind of the tending jobs. Weeds again, a light hoe in your beds on dry days. If you do it on a dry day, those little seedlings that you hoe will be crisped up very quickly, and won't regrow. And yeah, that's a sort of a common one at that stage of the year. Inside in your polytunnel, when it comes to growing on your tomatoes, what you're really looking for at this stage is regular feeding. Any of the side shoots that you're taking off, try and do that job, the pruning of leaves, the pruning of side shoots, try and do that job in the morning time. And because what that does is it allows the daytime for the wound where you've broken off your side shoot, for example. It allows that wound to dry out. And because it dries out, it's less open, less susceptible to disease starting from there. Keep any discolored leaves, get them off as quick as you can, get them out of the greenhouse. Keep airflow as good as you possibly can. Water in the morning time, so watering at the base of the plant, not the leaves. Keep them growing and the leaves as dry as you possibly can up top, and that would give you a real benefit in terms of any disease starting to build up. Don't leave any cuttings or clippings that you take off your tomatoes in the house. Get them out with there, and get them onto your compost heap once they've no disease on them. Get them out and into your compost heap, but just don't leave them in the house, and keep that whole growing area quite clean. Don't be afraid to feed them on a regular basis. So at this stage of the year, every week, a good seaweed feed would be a huge benefit to them. And don't be afraid also to, if you don't have much pollinators coming through your greenhouse, to give your plants a rattle and a shake. Try and get that pollination happen naturally as well. So all of those things will help. And airflow is a big one at this stage of the year. When it comes to watering then as well, rather than going in every day and throwing a little bit of water on any of those plants in there, I'm talking now about tomatoes, cucumbers, any of the squashes, anything that you have growing in your polytunnel or even outside. If you are watering, don't do real regular waterings. So what happens then, if you're watering your tomatoes every second day, giving them a little drop of water every second day, what happens is the roots don't have to work at all to gain access to the water or the moisture. So they stay up high. The roots don't need to work. So what you're looking to do is once a week, give them a really deep watering. So a good drop of water on those days. Let a lot of water soak down into the ground, but then don't do anything for a week. Let it work a little bit. Let those roots, go searching, and that will lead to a stronger plant, a more resilient plant anyway. So they're kind of the tips for the month of July, and I suppose that's the big thing. Watering potatoes, watching out for blight, supporting and pruning your tomatoes, cucumbers, beans, etc. Hoeing, watching out for pests and act on that if you need to. And then keeping your beds full. So if you have potato crop that has just come out, or an onion crop that has just come out, make sure you have something to go back in there. If you have plug plants that are ready to go, or if you don't, go buy some and get them in there and give yourself an opportunity to get more harvest later in the year. Or if you've decided that once you get to this time of the year, you're closing off certain beds, then definitely get, a green manure into that. Keep the ground covered as much as you possibly can. Ripening fruit, just keep an eye out for birds. As I said, they're going to be watching them as much as you are. So you're waiting on your black currants to turn to the perfect color. The birds are checking them every day. So the day that they're right or ripe, they'll be gone. So you need to keep an eye on that as much as they are. And, as I said, protect with a net or harvest as soon as they're ready. Don't leave them hanging around there because they'll be gone and gone very quickly. Sometimes people decide that they're, if they have enough of their own, they're going to designate one bush to leave for the birds, or they're going to take off 70% of the harvest and leave some for the birds. That's a possibility as well if you feel like sharing it. If not, get them off because they won't wait for you and the way you might for them. So yeah, definitely do that. And yeah, that's kind of the jobs when it comes to the veg garden. There's a lot less to be sowing, but there's still lots to be done. And it's definitely a month, where a lot of harvest. It's kind of peak harvest months, July, end of June, July, August. They're the peak harvest months. And I suppose they're enjoyable months in that, there's it's a less pressurized growing than it would have been earlier in the time. So lots to be sowing and lots to be doing in the garden. The usual thing is watering, feeding. If you're talking about your flowers, deadheading, regular trimming of those, making sure that you're getting fresh growth coming through, fresh flowers coming through. Feeding quite regularly, things like hanging baskets and so on, keeping on top of roses. We spoke about that last week, taking off any dead blooms, same for peonies or anything like that. Keeping all of those, anything that has a potential rot on it, get them off, and that will allow that your blooms will come more and more forward. As I say, weather has been a little bit strange still, and has meant that there's probably things on this list that we wouldn't typically have on the list in July. So that's your seed sowing guide for July. Again, as people really find these helpful and useful at keeping them on track. So I hope it helps for this month. We'll be back in August with the August sowing guide, and that'll be a very different one again, quite a lot smaller, and we'll be really tailing off at that stage. A couple of good interviews coming up, open garden interviews, and yeah, lots of interesting ones in the pipeline. And next week's episode, we're looking at Carlow Garden Festival. So fantastic garden festival that's coming up, and that's really worth checking out. There's some fantastic speakers, really good locations, and yeah, really worth checking out. So keep an eye out for next week's episode. And that's been this week's episode. Thanks for listening, and until the next time, happy gardening.